So, Dave, you're on the show now. That bit in Ocean Planet, what were they?
Yeah, just bent pinch harmonics.
Sweet. Hello and welcome to Thrown In at the Shallow End. I'm your host Robert McGinn, and today's guest, you may have heard already, is David Spencer. Would you prefer Dave or David?
Either, I don't mind.
Fair enough. Dave. We'll go with Dave.
Yeah.
And we're doing an album again. We're back with another album review. It's not going to be every week, album reviews. It's just they're quite easy to do in the first few setups. Unless, someone suggests something like, I don't know, top of my head, Final Fantasy VII or something like that.
Might take you a while, that one. But...
Yeah, I'll try and get cracking on it, but no promises. So yeah, the album we're listening to, well, if you would like to introduce the album that we're listening to today.
So it's Unstoppable Momentum by Joe Satriani.
That was a question I did. I did a little bit of background watching into some of the videos he's done, like some of the interviews he did around it.
Yeah.
One thing that immediately stuck out to me, he says it's Satriani.
Ah. Yeah, I guess it's Italian, so it makes sense, but... Yeah,
I'm going to be saying Satriani the whole time, because it's just how I've heard it.
It's just how I've always said it, so, yeah.
I suppose, the first question I'd like to know is, what's your history with Joe Satriani?
So, basically, he's the reason I'm playing guitar.
Really?
So...
Had you been playing guitar for how long, sorry?
So it was since I was just about 16, so almost 10 years now.
We're old.
Yeah.
But wow, so that was, I knew he was up there with, Vi, but would you say he's number one in terms of your guitar idols?
Yeah, for me, yeah, definitely.
And do you remember what the album was that got you into?
So it was Surfing with the Alien. Basically, all through school, I used to hate music. It was so boring. And I didn't take it as a GCSE subject, but towards the end of school, for the last year and a half, I ended up in the Steel Pans band. A friend of mine persuaded me to go along to it. He'd been doing it for years. I actually really enjoyed it. I ended up being a lead player for that. But then, obviously, once school had finished, that was kind of it. I didn't have any association with music anymore, playing music anymore. But yeah, basically, I was actually playing Guitar Hero 3. While playing through that, I started off, I was really bad, couldn't do anything, and gradually got better and better, could play everything on expert. And all the time playing it, I just kept thinking, I really wish I could play proper guitar. Why don't I play proper guitar? And then I think it was in the DLC songs, Surfing with the Alien was there. I remember just playing that song, and immediately was just like, I'm picking up a guitar. I don't care, I'm doing it, I'm going to learn guitar. And obviously, from there, I just got into more of his stuff, gradually learnt guitar, and eventually learnt to play Surfing with the Alien. And from there, just got into more of his music.
Right, and that was the, I didn't realise it really went back to, because I don't know, in my mind, you were always just playing the guitar.
Yeah, I guess it's not something I've never really talked about how I got into guitar.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was literally from, as I say, Guitar Hero 3 was it was building all the way through that I wanted to play guitar, but then as soon as I heard Surfing with the Alien, I was just, I want to play guitar like that. That's how I want to play.
Yeah, that is, as I say, this is getting me into Joe Satriani, Satriani, and it's not literally my first experience with him, and the first one I had was Surfing with the Alien, and I do remember having, I'll try and learn that.
Yeah.
But I was sort of dee 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 dee.
Yeah.
It's it didn't really work for me.
Yeah, that's, I guess maybe we'll be getting on to sort of why I chose this album, but that brings into it.
Well, as you say, that was the next question.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, with things like Surfing with the Alien, originally, Satriani used to play basically all the instruments apart from the drums.
Oh, right.
And at that time, as far as I know, guitar instrumental albums weren't really a thing. So there was much more of a focus on, he had to make the guitar the focal point, and it had to be really interesting, and all these crazy solos and stuff to actually make it an album worth putting out there. Whereas nowadays, he's got more freedom to do what he wants. He plays with full bands now, and kind of gives them freedom to play whatever they want to play. So you end up with more interesting drums, bass. There's now, especially on this album, there's quite a heavy use of keyboards.
Yeah, that was something I'd made a note of, yeah.
In my opinion, that makes the album feel much bigger than some of the older songs used to.
Okay.
And I think that was kind of... I can't remember the exact words you used, but I seem to remember you saying things like songs off Surfing with Alien and kind of just guitar wanking. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've subsequently gone back and listened to a few, and some of them I wouldn't call Surfing with Alien itself still.
Yeah.
And looking at it...
I think your example was Ice 9.
Yeah.
For just crazy soloing.
Yeah. And there is certainly a market for that, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And again, just sort of going spoilers a bit into this album, it's not what I found in this album either. And it's one of those things where I think I was a little unfair to label Satriani as just guitar wanking.
Yeah.
Because when you compare him to someone like Malmsteen, you know...
Yeah, it's nothing like that.
No.
But, I'd say much more of his more recent work is kind of more standard kind of song structure with less of an emphasis on crazy soloing. There are still solos in there. There are still crazy bits, but there's much less of an emphasis on that than maybe there used to be in some of the older albums.
Okay. And so, I suppose comparing it to the other albums, how would you stack it up? Do you directly compare it to other albums, or do you think it's its own separate thing, given how different it is?
It's quite a tough one, because, to be honest, I think this one was like his 16th studio album or something, and he's released 2 more since then. And there's always similarities, but it's always quite different, the kind of direction he goes on and the kind of overall feel of the album. But if I had to place it, I'd say it's in my top 3 of his albums. Obviously, like, I'd put Surfing with the Alien number 1, and then just in terms of as an overall album, pretty much every song I feel is great on this album. Whereas maybe some of the older ones, there's a few that aren't fantastic, but then there are songs on older albums that probably are better than what's on this album, but standalone songs here and there.
It's a consistent album, yeah.
Yeah, much more consistent in my opinion.
And it was interesting, I think it was what was interesting for me listening to it is because back in the day I really didn't like instrumental music.
Yeah.
I don't know why, without some form of a vocal melody, even given how melodic he can be.
Yeah.
Any sort of vocal melody, without that, I sort of lost interest over a whole album.
Yeah.
But I was listening to Joe Satriani's interview, and it was a very interesting thing it was directly opposite to what I used to think, which is where he was saying, like, the song names.
Yeah.
But he was saying for this album, he didn't go in and tell everyone he was playing with what the song name was going to be.
Yeah, I think I've seen this video as well.
And he was saying it came from other songs, like Crying, I think he mentioned, from The Extremist.
Yeah.
Where Crying is often seen as like a love song, or it was played over, like, in some country they played it as like the background to like a sports promo sort of thing. Yeah. And it was actually a song about his dad dying. And like...
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently it's a song about his dad dying, but he was trying to find some sort of positive outlook in that despairing time. And it's that sort of thing where, like, back in the day I used to think, that's pointless, no one's going to really get what the song's about then. But I really much more appreciate it now, how the artist can have an interpretation of it, the audience can have an interpretation, and neither is inherently more valid than the other one. And that was something I really enjoyed thinking about going through this album.
Yeah, because I think he said with this one, he had some really, like, weird, maybe just the scale name as the working title or some kind of crazy working title to try and get the other musicians to play maybe in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you track 3 used to be called Fast Robot.
Yeah.
But I suppose we can actually get into the track review if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So track 1 is the title track, Unstoppable Momentum.
Yep.
And that is... If it's not my favourite track on the album, it's fighting for favourite track on the album. Because it's really good. It's got this great 5/4 groove to it. It's just a very good mix of what I was hoping to find with Satriani, which is a good mix of...
Yeah, the melody and...
Yeah, melody, but also impressive instrumental.
Yeah. I quite find the rhythm section that it starts with and obviously goes on throughout, it's quite nice and sort of almost ambient kind of music.
It is, actually, yeah. And that crops up a few times on the album, actually, but...
Yeah.
That much mellower sound than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Although apparently I don't know if you've seen this, I was, again, just in the interview. There's apparently a technique he uses in this called the meat cleaver.
Yes, it's something he taught Chad Smith, is it? I think
the drummer from Chili Peppers, so probably not. But...
No, I'm sure it was wanting to learn something on guitar, and apparently it's this. I don't exactly know what it is, but it's this. At the time, Satriani said it was this useless technique that, like, you'd never ever use.
Oh, right.
And then apparently on this album, Yeah, he found the perfect point to use it. I don't know exactly what it is.
Well, apparently what it is, you use your left hand to depress the whammy bar,
Right.
and with your right hand, you sort of just chop on the up top strings of the neck.
Yeah,
But at like different places to get the right harmonic feeling. Okay, yeah, well, that was a cool thing I just heard in the interviews about this song. The ending's really good. The drumming on the ending.
How he just goes crazy. Yeah.
Because apparently, I looked into the personnel on the album, and apparently he's a very well-respected drummer. Like Satriani was really, really excited that he got for the album.
Yeah, I think he's regarded as pretty much one of the best drummers in the world. I think.
I can see why. He's a really good drummer on this album.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I think just one of the notes I made here, which is it's a really good opener and it's interesting. It shows a lot of techniques, but it's not what I would describe as noodly and like.
Yeah, it's not in your face.
Yeah, it's a really good introduction to the album. Then we go on to the next track, which is "Can't Go Back." This is where we mentioned that there's more keyboards on this album.
Yeah.
I think there was a really good interplay between the guitar and the keyboards, feeding off one another. But I thought it had like a. This is what I wasn't expecting from a Satriani album. I would describe this as a disco track.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Almost. Okay, it's got a disco feel to it.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing with Satriani. I guess once you've listened to maybe more of his stuff, he has got a very wide variety of the kind of stuff. Yeah, he does. Like there's like a soul funk kind of song in one. I think it's which albums? I think that's on Flying in a Blue Dream. But yeah, obviously a lot of the Flying in a Blue Dream stuff. There's vocals on that album as well. So that's something that maybe you wouldn't expect.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, there's all sorts of different styles he uses. In particular, I guess maybe there's an album I'd probably suggest to you, and I guess maybe we can come back to that later.
Was this Shockwave Supernova?
That would be one, but there's another one, Engines of Creation.
Okay.
That's essentially a techno album.
Huh.
Yeah, it was kind of an experimental album for him. It's basically everything's kind of all digitally and messed about with, and it's all as I say, techno album's kind of the best way of describing it. It's a weird album, but it is good.
If you're going to be making music for as long as he has been making music, you're going to try branching out into these different styles. Yeah. I need to give that a listen actually then. But is there much more to say about Can't Go Back? It is a good track. It's got a great sense of melody on it. And it's my very upbeat, sort of danceable number almost.
I've just got things like, I love the kind of like the bassy intro, the wah riff fits in really nicely, things like that. When the double track to Ascending Runs come in, I quite like that part.
Yeah, there's a few bits in the in this album where they do a lot of like little climbing bits and falling bits.
Yeah.
I'll probably highlight a few of them, but yeah, this was one of the tracks that had that as well.
Yeah. One point as a negative that I can pick up on this one is I felt it just ends on a chord. It kind of builds for a while and then just ends on a chord. I felt maybe just a fade out might have worked better for that.
That's a fair point.
But that's probably the only thing I can pick up with it.
I mean, this is again the sort of thing where if that's the sort of level of critique we're bringing to a song, it's not going to be too bad.
Yeah.
So then we go into track 3, Lies and Truth, which probably does actually beat out Unstoppable Momentum, my favourite track on the album.
Yeah, I really like this track. I love the concept behind it.
I didn't know what the concept is, sorry?
So it's kind of like the verses are the kind of like the dark, bassy sounding riffs and low end notes. They're kind of like the lies, and then it builds up kind of optimistically to the chorus, which is then really kind of trebly and upbeat, and that's the truths.
Okay. That's quite interesting, actually, yeah. And I say, like, the rhythm at the intro does have that much darker feeling to it.
Yeah.
And it's got that cool... it sounds like he's doing that thing where he just hits the whammy bar in the right rhythm and pitch, but that's really cool. And the drums, again, like Unstoppable Momentum, the groove at that intro, like the sort of slightly jarring, janky sort of sound is really good. But they're still compelling. They're not, like, sort of all over the place. Again, the organ and the interplay with the guitar. The keyboards were really quite prominent, and a lot more prominent than I was expecting from a Joe Satriani album.
Well, as far as I know, I think this is the first album where he uses Mike Keneally, who is on the guitar and keyboards, and he's amazing. I don't think he's playing with him live anymore, but it was this album onwards. I think it was for maybe 2 or 3 tours he's played.
All right.
And yeah, he can play guitar and keyboard at the same time. Yeah. He's amazing.
Wow, that's a good person to get. And there was also the a really good pick tapping thing, which he does He does a lot, and I really like
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, but and the great harmonies are highlighted as well. I love guitar harmonies at the best of times, and this album's peppered with them. So yeah, that was probably my favourite track.
Yeah, I think it is probably one of my favourites. With maybe the next track possibly my favourite.
3 Sheets to the Wind.
Yeah, I really like this one.
I'm going to disagree with you there.
All right.
This was possibly my least favourite of the album.
All right.
Just because I thought it was very different, and don't get me wrong, like 3 Sheets to the Wind being a euphemism for being drunk.
Yeah.
The intro captures that perfectly.
Yeah.
That very sort of like swaying, woozy feeling.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get over the fact that it just sounds really goofy.
Yeah, I take that point. Yeah.
There are bits in the the middle bit where he starts soloing and everything is cool. But when it just starts going into like the bum bum bum, it sounds like it's like background music as they're panning across like a bandstand in an old film. Like, I don't know, it's not. Yeah, it's got like the horn section, but it's not. I don't know if it really works. I think I've made a note here. It's like sounds a bit like a tech demo for music software.
Almost, maybe.
This is just my opinion. You can disagree entirely. You can tell me I'm full of. Oh, we've said wank. I can say shit. It's fine.
Again, yeah. Again, it's I just really like the concept. Like, again, this was from watching one of his videos. It's kind of, I think his idea behind this song was kind of like this guy really dressed up in coat and tails, and he's had one too many cocktails.
Oh yeah.
So he's trying to stumble home, and kind of like the bits where it gets all really crazy and there's sirens and stuff going off. That's kind of meant to symbolise him getting into trouble.
Oh, right.
And kind of like when it all just goes quiet, it's kind of it's like somehow he's got out of that situation, and then it kind of resolves and he finds his way home. So again, it's one of them. It's kind of it's a concept song.
That does actually that does make it sound quite better as well. It's not the sort of sound I'd ever go back to listen to.
Yeah, I guess it's the kind of thing that you wouldn't, without seeing the video and knowing. Obviously, you know it's kind of meant to be about being drunk.
Yeah.
But you maybe won't pick up on the getting into trouble business and finally sort of stumbling home immediately.
I can certainly appreciate the song. Like, it's not like this is total garbage. It's worthless. It's just not something I'd typically go back and listen to. So it's arguably it's probably my least favourite, but that's not saying an awful lot, to be honest.
Yeah. For me, it's just because of how different it is that I really like it.
That's true.
But yeah, to be honest, I must admit, maybe it isn't my favourite. I think probably Lies and Truth is actually my favourite. And to be honest, when I saw that live, Lies and Truth was amazing.
I can imagine that would be an amazing song live.
Yeah.
That's the thing, Satriani, I reckon, even if you aren't that into his music, he'd be really good to see live. Yeah,
it was an amazing show. To be honest, that's another reason why this album really sticks out for me. This was the first time I saw him live for this album.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, that is really. I could see like a lot of these tracks being really, really a spectacle to see live.
Yeah.
Suppose then we move on to track 5, which is "I'll Put a Stone on Your Cairn," which a cairn is some sort of stone monument.
Yeah, stone monument. Yeah.
However, this is going back to the thing he mentioned before about the audience having a perception of a song, and he has his own personal perception that he doesn't necessarily let anyone know.
Yeah.
A cairn is also a breed of dog.
Right.
So I like to think that he's written this long, quiet, sort of Celtic-sounding interlude track about stoning someone's dog to death.
Oh, I like it. I highly doubt that is the actual
Probably not. It is probably about someone passing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do like this.
Yeah, this is one of my favourites.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that it's so stripped back. There's literally just keys and guitar.
Yeah, it's got that lovely drone. Like I mentioned, it's got a Celtic sort of sound. It's a very visual song. You could imagine. It does paint a picture in your mind, this one, of standing on some craggy outcrop somewhere, wind whipping about you, and there's a monument to someone. It's a very short song, but it's a really good addition. It really breaks up the album, and it gives a nice bit of respite before going into A Door into Summer, which I could imagine it being a really good summer driving song.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, if I was ever in the States in a convertible or something, this would be one of the tracks I'd like to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've got is, like, fits the title perfectly. It does really just feel like, a summer song.
Yeah.
You just get that feeling immediately.
Which was nice to get away from in January. Oh,
yeah.
But yeah, this was one of the bits where, thinking back when listening to this about how I used to describe Joe Satriani about, he's just guitaring, he's just like nearly noodling all the time. And this was the song I noticed where like, I really missed the mark here because it's very melodic. This song in particular. And again, going back to that interplay between the keyboards and the guitars, creates this, it is melody and counterpoint and everything. It's not just craziness all the time.
Yeah, that's one of the things about Joe Satriani. I mean, the amount of music knowledge that he has is incredible. There's always these little things in there that maybe you won't pick up on immediately, but there's some theory reason behind why he's done it. But yeah, I think probably this album in particular, there's a lot of kind of points like that.
Yeah, that was one of my favourite tracks, that one.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't get quite as high as Unstoppable Momentum and Lies and Truth, but it shows, like, it's sort of, you're halfway through the album, but he's not put any filler in, really.
Yeah,
like, even the song I didn't particularly care for, I appreciate what he was going for with it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel like he's just gone, here's a tune.
Yeah, he's most of the time, like, yeah, he's always got some kind of concept behind every song. There's always a reason for it to be there. I think, in particular, this song, Adoring to Summer, I think he wrote this ages. I think this was kind of around the time of Summer Song.
Oh, right.
So this will be like 90s or so. But he'd not, obviously at that time it was kind of just a demo, he'd not actually finished it out. And whenever he does things like that, if it's not right, he doesn't release it and he waits and he'll change it slightly and wait for the right band members to do something with the song.
Okay.
And then once he feels it's right, that's when he puts it into an album.
Well, that's very admirable, yeah. You can tell he really does take the fact that this is his job very seriously.
Yeah.
He's not overly flippant or dismissive about anything. He really does take everything he does very, very seriously.
Yeah.
You get that impression both in his music and if you listen to him speak about his music as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, then we move on to track 7, Shine On American Dreamer. And this had a great sort of running rhythm, I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
It was, I would have said it was a bit more average. It wasn't quite as good as, say, like Adoring to Summer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that one. I mean, it's one of those I've got here. It's kind of a very optimistic sounding song, as the title suggests, and then kind of especially as it gets into the chorus when it lifts up a bit more.
Yeah, it is done well. It's just I don't think it stands out as much. It's sandwiched between two very good songs, so it's a fine track. It's not going to blow anyone's mind, but I still even wouldn't really classify it as filler.
Yeah, and I get what you mean. Yeah,
it's a valid standalone track, but it's more towards that side of things, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I've got here is that it maybe goes on a little bit too long. The end rhythm kind of just goes on and on and on, and then it just comes to an end. And it could maybe have been, I don't know, 30 seconds shorter or something. Yeah. But yeah, other than that, yeah, like you say, it's a good song. It's not filler by any means.
Yeah, but it's
one of the
least impressive songs.
Least impressive, yeah.
But then we move into Jumpin' In, which has got a great riff.
I think this actually is a contender for my favourite song on this album.
Yeah, it is very good. The riff that it just comes in with. Yeah. It's just such a good riff. Yeah. Sometimes you can just...
Straight in your face.
Sometimes that's all you need in a song. You're just like, I've got a really good riff. I'm just going to play it around that. But then it's got the bits like we were mentioning before, like the climbing middle 8. Yeah. Comes back in later on. It's got a nice clean section in the middle of it.
One of the things I've got written down here is the fact that this is kind of like the most prog-like song. That was another reason why I picked this album, actually, because I felt it was probably his most kind of proggy album. Okay. And anyone that's known you for more than 5 minutes knows you love prog.
Yeah, that's me, pretty much. Yeah, but I can see that, especially considering it goes from, this really energetic riff into this climbing section, into like a clean section, into, again, like another weird funk disco section, back into the climbing section. It moves about all the place, and it all works seamlessly with one another.
Yeah, and then it just gradually builds to this crazy ending where everyone just starts going crazy on everything.
It's just like some sort of huge chaotic outro. Yeah. It's brilliant. Yeah, the change, I think I noticed in particular, from the weird like octave bass disco-y sort of feel back into the riff. Yeah. Really, really well done. That was like some of them were like nice changes, but that was a really like seamless transition that was worked really well. Yeah. And I suppose does it get paired with Jumping Out just because of the titles?
Yeah, it was kind of, as far as I know, the concept was kind of, it always had these two songs that he knew needed to be together. Yeah. And I think the concept is kind of exactly what we've been saying, kind of this build-up for Jumping In, just starting to go crazy, and then Jumping Out, kind of, it starts, hits you in the face, and then it's kind of like, well, what have I just been listening to? And then, again, they start to go a bit crazy. On Jumping Out to finish it off.
Oh yeah, that's another chaotic outro, but it's got that little bit in the middle where like the drums, there's probably some mixing term, but it just sounds like they just move further, like they're being played in a different room, like through a door.
Yeah, there'll be some kind of effect they can put on
it. Yeah, whatever it is, like it's another like great riff. You can tell they work together because it's just like riffs parts flowing into one another, and huge chaotic outros again. But yeah, this was a really good section of the album, I think, just these two tracks together. In the middle of an album, you need something to sort of kick it back towards the end, and these two really do kick it off.
Yeah, definitely.
So then we go from them. We're sorry if you were done with those two.
Yeah, I'm not really. I mean, I guess I've just got things like the bridge section in Jumping Out. I really stood out. Great melody there. I love the crazy sound effects that are in that song. And just the fact that it kind of starts out very dark and then gets brighter towards the end again.
Well, it's got another one of those climbing sections that we've spoken about before. So it sort of just builds and builds and builds, and then it goes down, builds and builds and builds again. Again, and it just builds to this crazy outro, like we mentioned. These two songs together are a really strong part of the album. I'm not sure I'd put them as my favourite, but they're really, really strong and well done. Yeah. Then we go into Weight of the World, which I would say is probably the oddest track that he's done on this.
I'd say, like you mentioned earlier, Three Sheets to the Wind. Yeah. I'd say that's his oddest. Then this is probably close to it.
That was the oddest. Well, this is actually going to the point that you brought up that I didn't know when I made these notes, that he'd made a techno album. But I hadn't really ever appreciated like that he could be using synths in the way he does here. Yeah. And it was like Three Sheets to the Wind I could still see as like, oh, that's a Joe Satriani song. It's just, it's an odd sounding Satriani song, but it's...
Yeah, it's still primarily kind of guitar based.
Yeah, this one is it opens, the opening I described as either an old fashioned PS1 Kung Fu game, or like the ad for like a spa somewhere. I don't know why, it really caught me off guard, that intro. It's not bad. It's just really what I was expecting, especially after Jumping Out and that outro.
I went back and listened to it again, and it doesn't actually sound like it, but for some reason it reminded me of Escape from New York, the music from that.
Oh, I've not actually seen that, but...
But it kind of, I don't know why, it just sort of, as I say, I immediately got reminded of that, but then I actually went and listened to it, and it wasn't actually that close to it, but for some reason I got that association.
It captures the same sort of feeling of it.
Yeah.
Okay. I've also described it as just, it's really 80s, this sound.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've got down is, like, obviously it kind of builds in with the synth and very little amounts of guitar, and then when the drums kick in, I really like that transition. Yeah.
It is a really good... It's, again, none of these songs are badly put together. Like, you can tell he had an idea of what he wanted to do, and then he's implemented it really well. It was just like a 80s sci-fi film. But, like, Weight of the World even sounds like a sci-fi film title.
Yeah, it could be.
It was really out of left field for this one. And it was good. I enjoyed it. But I was mostly sitting through it going, I was not expecting this. This is really not what I was expecting from Joe Satriani. And I suppose it speaks to his credit as a musician and someone who can play a diverse range of music.
Yeah, outside the box, not what you'd expect.
Exactly. Because I was expecting I was going to hear Surfing with the Alien 11 times, essentially.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if you listen to more of his stuff, there's a very wide range of styles that he uses. There's all sorts. I could probably suggest a few off the top of my head, maybe not, but I could probably suggest a few things to you to listen to.
Likewise with what we did with Chris, we could just put some in the show notes of the podcast. Yeah. But I think that's what's good about this album, is that it gives you like a flavour of all those different styles that he does. Yeah. And it's like, just in one contained album, it shows you just the breadth and the scope of what he can actually do as a musician. Yeah. But yeah, that was Weight of the World. It was an odd one, but it was a good one. Yeah. But then it goes into a really good closer. I really like this as an album closer. It's called A Celebration.
Yeah, and this is I think one of the things in one of the videos he does, he kind of says he always knew this was the end of the album. You couldn't have anything after this song.
Yeah, pretty much. He knows what he's talking about, that Joe Satriani. But it's got a great energy. It's got a real strong country sound to it, I thought.
Yeah, well, apparently, this song, it used to be about half the tempo, and it was all acoustic guitars.
I can see that. And then worked really well.
It kind of wasn't working. And apparently, I think he says he was having some work done in his house or something, so he was just sat at the kitchen table playing about with his guitar. Kind of figured out what he wanted for the actual melodies and everything. And then he was watching a film or something, and there was just this train in it chugging along.
That makes sense.
And then he twigged and got the rhythm for it, the driving drum beats, the rhythm for it, and that kind of finished the song for him.
I should have noticed that. It's like a train. Yeah, that's... Yeah. Now you mention it, it's blindingly obvious, but that sort of driving rhythm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the energy it puts into the last bit of the album.
Yeah.
Just to bring it home, it's really, really good. And it's a really good title as well. Like, he's good at the titles.
Definitely after the kind of synth, more kind of, it's not dark, but it's sort of
slightly sinister.
Little dark. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it comes in with this, and it's really upbeat and uplifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good change.
It's got the nice falling harmonies after that as well. Like,
yeah.
Just to close everything out. It's a really good album closer. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the album.
Yeah.
But I'll let you give your overall sort of summary.
Pretty much just the kind of things we've been saying. It's, like you say, it's a really good, diverse mix of songs, kind of shows exactly the kind of things it can do. Overall, there's not really any song, whereas maybe on previous albums, there's a few songs I think, it's not great. On this one, I wouldn't say there's any song I'd not want to listen to again. So yeah, overall, for me, as I've already said, it's probably in my top 3. I'd probably maybe even second favourite album of his.
Yeah, and I can see why. It's because again, going back to like what I said last week, you really did stick to the brief in terms of getting a good introduction to the artist's work, because I really like the album as well.
Oh, good to hear.
Yeah, I'd never thought, like, I'd always considered like that sort of music, instrumental guitar-based rock, to be. I'm not a guitarist. I don't really appreciate, like, oh, look how difficult that is to do, because it's not something I can practically try and do myself. But I really hadn't appreciated just how much melody and how much diversity in music there could be on the album.
Yep.
And that really shined through on this album in particular. And I think, because I did look, you did think you also were toying between this and Shockwave Supernova, I think was the one. And I had a quick listen to some of that, and I did find that a little more difficult to get into.
Yeah, I'd say that's more sort of classic, sort of just more guitar focused, but still there is the keyboards in there. There's better bass, better drums than there used to be. But it is more crazy guitar than this album.
Yeah, but the thing is, I went and initially listened to that before Unstoppable Momentum, because I sort of just listened to both.
Yeah.
And I think if I went back to it after listening to this, I think I'll appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much like exactly what you want to do from this podcast project, essentially. Like, just give me an into someone's musical work. Okay, so moving on from Joe Satriani, we go into the album I asked you to listen to, which is Platinum by Mike Oldfield.
Yep.
Well, the main reason I asked you to listen to this album is because it's an album I can't really be objective on.
Right.
Because it's an album from my childhood. I have very, very vivid memories of me and my family just driving around on holiday, like in Holland or Belgium or something like that, and we would listen to this album a lot.
Right.
I've got very fond memories of the album. I really like it, just to give it away now, but it's more difficult for me to be critical of it. So that's why I wanted someone else to bring in a critical eye.
Yeah.
But the reason I suggested it paired with Joe Satriani was predominantly for the first part of the album.
Yeah. I can definitely see the parallels with the first 4.
Yeah, the Platinum Suite was the main reason. The rest of the album is not completely out of left field, but it's less to do with Joe Satriani. But there's bits like, I think it was listening to Can't Go Back and having that slightly more disco-y feel.
Yeah.
There's a few disco-y sounding tracks on Platinum.
Yeah,
and I think that's what tied the two together in my head.
Yeah.
I suppose I should just go into asking, how did you feel about the album?
I'd say overall it's one of those that there are some really good points on it, and then there's a few songs that are a bit, probably wouldn't sit and listen to them again, but
that's fair.
I'd definitely say the Platinum Suite. I actually really enjoyed that.
That was the main point of why I suggested it. So that was the bit. I'm glad you liked that bit.
Yeah, and then I'd say Woodhenge I really enjoyed, and then there's bits of the others I really enjoyed, but overall as songs, probably, as I said, wouldn't want to keep listening to them over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not surprised you weren't too fond of Punkadiddle.
Yeah,
which is I enjoyed because I listened to it when I was first 11, and I have fond memories of that.
Right.
looking at it critically, it's not very good.
Yeah.
Like, it's got some good riffs in it, but it's a bit silly.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's
the main thing I thought is, what's with the cheering crowd just randomly coming in all over the place?
Interesting thing about the cheering crowd. The song Into Wonderland was not originally on the album.
Right.
It was a song called Sally, and Sally flowed seamlessly into Punkadiddle.
Right.
But they changed it, so they cut out Sally and put Into Wonderland in.
Yeah. So I guess that explains the bizarre intro that just doesn't fit Punkadiddle at all.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a weird... The weird thing with Punkadiddle as well that I heard was like, oh, he wrote it as a parody of punk rock.
I can understand that, yeah.
It's sort of, but it's like, Mike, you understand what punk sounds like. It's not... It's like a little keyboard going do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Like, what are you doing, Michael? But it was... I suppose if we just go through the tracks as we did before, so there's the Platinum Suite, which is comprised of Airborne, Platinum, Charleston, and North Star / Finale.
Yep.
And yeah, I really like that opening suite. I think it...
Yeah, definitely.
Even... It still has sillier bits, like Charleston is a bit...
Yeah, Charleston's the weakest part for me, definitely.
It is. Definitely the weakest part. Like, it's got weird scat vocals in it and stuff,
Yeah.
but... The, I think the intro, that very restrained, it's just like a keyboard, and then I think a guitar comes in. There's so many points in this where I can't tell if it's just a really low-end guitar or it's a bass guitar.
Yeah, there's definitely a few bits where I've thought, yeah, what exactly is that?
Exactly. But there's it's got a really nice riff running through that bit.
Yeah.
And then it goes into a cool sort of high-end solo. Again, what I tried to think with this album was that it was tying a bit more into the melodic side of, like, sort of with Satriani, because Mike Oldfield he doesn't shred.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it is all about the riffs, the harmonies, the nice melodies here and there.
And then keyboards come in,
yeah,
because he's such a multi-instrumentalist as well. It's not just guitar, but it's one of his more guitar-heavy parts, I think, was the Platinum Suite.
Yeah.
And I think it was just the reason I thought you might enjoy it a bit more than, say, I don't know, the last half of the album, anyway, is because it has that sort of... I could imagine sitting down going, oh, I'm going to try and learn all the guitar parts.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, Airborne has a lot of different parts, so it's got the intro, it's got this initial riff, it's got another riff with slides and everything in it. It then transitions nicely into... It's a bit more like stomping and driven.
Yeah, I've got written here, I kind of like the nice build-up, and then I love it when that main riff kicks in.
Mm.
I've also quite an interesting guitar tone as well that runs throughout the entire album.
Really?
Yeah, I thought it's weird. It's not standard.
Because that's the thing, I'm the wrong person to talk to about guitar tone, so I was wondering what stood out to you about it.
It was just kind of a little bit choppy and really trebly. I don't know, I can't say as I've heard many tones like it before. Because
I think that's the thing, whenever I've tried to record guitar for myself before, I have previously gone like, this sounds a bit like Mike Oldfield, I'll just do that. And I think I have shown it to people and gone, what the hell have you done with the guitar? I'm like,
that explains it.
It's just what I know about guitar. I've distorted the hell out of it and just played high things. That's it, isn't it? Yeah, that's something I wouldn't have picked up on, I suppose, then, because it's... Yeah, but his style of playing, I think, also might factor into that.
Probably, yeah.
Because he plays with his fingers.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that explains it.
Like, he plays essentially like a bassist, like with his index and middle finger instead of a plectrum.
Yeah, that'll explain the sort of slight choppiness to it, and I guess, it like you say, it's probably just really distorted, really high treble. And yeah, it's kind of high notes, so yeah, that'll probably account for a lot of it. But it is slightly unusual.
Mm. And even in Charleston, where that sort of drops out for a bit, and it goes into a weird... It's weird. I can't describe it any other way. It's very weird. Like, the bit with the horn section comes in, and then there's scat vocals in it.
Yeah. One thing I've got for Charleston, I've got when the scat vocals in, it's just really... creepy sounding.
It is
because the scat's whispered, and then there's the like really high pitched that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just, especially if you're listening with headphones on.
Oh god, I can imagine
because it goes from left to right as well.
It's like just, Pennywise coming in behind you.
Yeah, it's really weird.
There's a lot of points in the album where you just think like you had a really good thing here, and then you did a goofy thing.
Yeah.
A really goofy thing.
Yeah,
like
the music for Charleston I really like it. It is really good. But then the vocals come in and it just kind of ruins it a little bit.
Yeah, the vocals are always an odd part of Mike Oldfield. Even on Tubular Bells. At least that was done intentionally to be weird. He apparently just screamed into a microphone, essentially. Just weird noise, but when it was played at double speed. So recording at double speed. So when they played it normal speed, it was really like low pitched.
Right.
And it was, I think he did that because Virgin Records were saying, well, you need vocals on an album. And he went, I'll give you vocals on an album. But there's usually a point to it. But then there's like, you've got these really nice sort of choirs singing, and then just weird scatting. It's, I'm going to keep coming back to it because it's so weird.
It is definitely very weird.
But then it goes into North Star, which I think is probably the best bit of the album.
Yeah, that's my favourite track as well.
It's one of my favourite Mike Oldfield bits, actually. Because Platinum, I think, is widely regarded as an average Mike Oldfield.
Yeah, the thing I had with Platinum is I really like the riff, really like all the drums and the bass line and everything. Yeah. But it just goes on too long.
It does.
The first bit is kind of like a verse chorus. It goes on for about nearly 4 minutes, just the same thing over and over again. But it is good, but yeah, it goes on too long. Because
Airborne varies it up, but it's got a great riff. But then, Platinum comes in, it's just got a very repetitive flow to it, and it does drag. And then goes into Charleston again. I really like the music, but the horns are really good. The acoustic guitar runs are really good.
Yeah.
Shame about the scatting. We've moved on, but then we get into North Star, and I think that's the bit that works cohesively the best. Like, it's got a great build up.
Very, very good build up. It's almost got a kind of like Western sort of horsebike riding feel to it. Yeah.
I think this is where the guitar works the best as a crescendo to a piece. Like, it's played really high with the treble, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And it's just screaming over this sort of really sort of building beat.
Yeah, and I'd say with the vocals in Charleston being really weird, the vocals here work really well.
Yeah.
It's just a nice accompaniment to everything else that's going on.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. And it's good to hear as well, because it's nice to end on a high note, even if you've got odd bits in the middle.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the Platinum Suite sort of rounded out.
One thing I'll bring up with Airborne, I don't know if this is intentional, but I get the feeling because with the artwork, it's a butterfly sitting on the platinum.
Yeah.
I get the feeling that with Airborne, it's kind of like a story of this butterfly kind of taking its first flight. I don't know if that's intended, because it's kind of, you get this really build-up where it's kind of like maybe it's tentatively taking its first flight, it's setting off. Then it kind of, the riff kicks in, that's kind of when it's getting its confidence. It can fly properly then. And then it kind of, you get this attitude change towards the end where it's kind of more aggressive, so it kind of, maybe it's getting a bit cocky. And then something happens, and it kind of, like, the ending's really sort of, like, you get this descending kind of run. Maybe it's come up, maybe falling out of the sky or something. Huh. I got that kind of impression from it. I don't know if that's the intention.
I'm not entirely sure, because I don't... This is the sort of thing I've missed, having not really grown up with instrumental music. I've got recently got more into it in the last 2 years or so, but I never really grew up with it. So I always missed those sorts of things. I'd never thought about it that way. It's certainly a plausible interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And I might actually have to go back and listen to that now, because that's a really good... Yeah. That's a good story to try and think through, actually.
Because I just kind of, I really did get that impression from it. Cause that's exactly, it's kind of, it does build in exactly the kind of way you'd expect. And then there's this fall at the end. And, I mean, otherwise, why is the butterfly on the album art?
That is true, yeah.
And it's called Airborne.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be completely wrong. But
it's one of those things that I've always argued, that it doesn't really matter what the artist intended. If you can justify what you think, then it's a valid interpretation. I need to go back and listen to that. Hang on. Butterfly. There you go. So, overall, I think, as you mentioned, a bit varied, but...
Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. As even Charleston, I really enjoy the music of it. It's just the weird vocals just kill it a bit for me. But yeah, overall... Yeah. And yeah, Platinum's a little bit repetitive, but I can let it off because it is a really cool riff. Mm. But yeah, North Star really does finish it off brilliantly for me. I love that track.
I would love to go and see that live one day, but
yeah,
I'm not sure if he does any live music anymore. But then we get into the second half of the album, which we may as well go through.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that this entire review's been a bit jumping all over the place because I don't know, because the Platinum Suite is everything sort of flows into one another. You can jump about all over the place.
It is essentially one big song.
Yeah. Because then we go into Woodhenge, which is, I think it's a good come down from the entire suite. It's just a very relaxed...
Yeah, starts really relaxing. Yeah. And then, builds and builds and gets crazy towards the end.
Yeah, with the bells and everything, just the noise.
I kind of, again, the feeling I got from this is kind of like, I don't know, maybe just like a journey through the woods, and you kind of, maybe it's this kind of ritual going on or something.
Well, it's based on something like Stonehenge. It's not actually Stonehenge, but it's related to that sort of thing. I can't remember what it is, but that I did pick up on, that sort of ritualistic, druidic sort of feel to it.
Yeah, definitely. As I say, kind of almost with a nice relaxing start, it's kind of maybe, I don't know, maybe someone's just wandering through the woods and then they get dragged into this ritual that's going on. That's kind of feel I got, because it does start really relaxing. There's not much going on, and then it just gradually builds and builds and just gets crazy towards the end.
That's an interesting interpretation, actually. A lot of these songs I'm going to have to go back and listen to again now that you've sort of gone think about this when you're listening to it. Like, oh, that makes it really good. But yeah, then we go into Wonderland, which again I really like because I grew up with it as a kid.
Yeah.
It's a fun track, but if I'm going to step back and look at it, oh, it's a doofy track.
Yeah, one thing I've got written here is that it's a really strange vocal style. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just something unusual about it.
About the woman's voice?
Just the style of singing.
Okay, right.
Not necessarily the voice, just the style that it's done in. It just really stood out as a bit weird.
There was like, say you would, like sort of like weird. I can appreciate that.
And then going really low. Kind of highs and then really low.
That is, yeah, I'd never picked up on that, actually. Yeah, that is there are a lot of those bits.
Yeah, it's just really strange.
And then there's also, again, the weird doo-woppy sort of vocals in the background.
To be honest, strangely enough, that actually was probably my favourite part of the song. the middle section. When it
the solos. I like the solo.
Yeah, the solo's pretty good. But that kind of middle section where the strange doo-wop kind of stuff comes in, that actually was pretty good.
He's a musically diverse man, if he's nothing else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to the lyrics as well, some of them are just sort of like...
a bit cheesy.
Will fly, honey pie, like, oh, God.
Yeah.
And then out of that we go into Punkadiddle, which, as you mentioned...
Yeah. With this, I do really like the intro. It just does not fit the song in the slightest.
Yeah, like it's a good riff and everything, and then it goes into a weird, like, keyboard-heavy little noodly riff, and some guys occasionally going, oi!
And a crowd cheering.
Yeah. I never really worked out, because I'll be honest, I sort of spitballed the idea that it was because of Sally, that it was...
Right.
Well, that was true, that Into Wonderland replaced a song called Sally, and Sally did go into...
Yeah, that makes much more sense why there's this intro there.
But that's the thing, that the intro is a part of Sally.
Yeah.
It was, I think it's the chorus proceedings of Sally. I can't remember exactly.
Right.
I don't think that explains the crowds, though, because I don't know if there's crowds in Sally.
Even if there was, why would you then have that in the next song?
I know.
It's a weird one.
A few bands I know do that as well. There's a song on Tormato by Yes, where it's just like, it goes into a really cool musical breakdown, but then there's just the sound of a crowd cheering. Like, what have you done?
Yeah. But yeah, I was just going to say, like, it's the kind of thing that I can understand maybe in certain situations it might make sense, but on this song it just feels out of nowhere. Like, it just doesn't fit.
Yeah, I'll grant you that. I remember it being my favourite track when I was 11.
Right.
So that was like, I would just be sort of going, oh, they're going to say oi in a minute now, yay. And it's like, I really liked it then, because it's a doofy sounding track, and it's, I was about to say it's meant to sound doofy because he's kind of taken the mick out of punk music, but I hate the excuse of, oh no, I intended to make it a bit naff.
Yeah.
Like, well, that doesn't make it like, oh, it's intentionally bad. Okay, I like it now.
Yeah, it is a bit of a weird idea.
Yeah. But then we round out the album, I think, quite nicely on I Got Rhythm. Yeah.
One thing I've got with this is I absolutely love that intro melody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cover. It's not...
Right. Yeah, as well, one thing I've got is that it feels much more like a typical song than anything else on the rest of the album. So it makes sense now that you said it's a cover.
But yeah, I think it was a very nice, calming take to end the album.
Yeah, that's exact. I've literally got nice, calming way to end the album written down. Exact words.
Because it's just sort of like, there we go. We've come out of some weird prog epic into a druid ritual, into a love song, into a pop, punk, mad thing. Yeah. And it's like, just nice, calming jazz number. That'll do.
Yeah, I'd say either... I can't decide between this and Woodhenge, which is my favourite of the second half. But it's definitely up there.
This is probably my favourite, just because it's more of a song. I could imagine more going back and listening to this more. I could say Woodhenge, but okay, that's good to hear. Anyway, that it's not, because I was kind of worried that you might get to the last half of the album and go, "This is all worthless."
Yeah, why am I listening to this?
Where are the sweet riffs?
Yeah, but yeah, that's. I guess that comes back to maybe something. Everyone always assumes I like rock music, metal music, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I love all sorts of music. Coming back to the Final Fantasy VII thing that I've got you talking to, there's a lot of music on that, like electronic kind of techno-y sort of stuff. I love all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It's kind of the kind of things my mom used to listen to as well. I picked up on that kind of things, all kind of funk and disco, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I just love all sorts of music.
Yeah, I think I've got to the point where I've like unfairly maligned you in my head for the last 8 years. Just sort of like, Dave, those metal stuff. That's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that rounds out the podcast, really.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned it before about giving suggestions that I'll put in the podcast notes, but have you had any more just off the top of your head that you might just throw out?
Not really, no. I'd have to go back and listen to specific songs, and then I can maybe point you in the direction. But yeah, off the top of my head, there's lots of songs I could suggest, but
if you want to make a good comprehensive list, that makes sense. Yeah, if you want to take some time to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think the only two suggestions I would then make for Mike Oldfield for going into that's like a radical departure from this, because I'm assuming you've heard Tubular Bells.
Yeah, I've not listened to the entire thing, but obviously the main music, obviously the Exorcist theme, that part of it.
But I would say definitely listen to Tubular Bells if you haven't. I'm also speaking to the audience now at this point as well. I'd say the whole album, but in particular side one. Side one is, I think, the best piece of music he's put together.
Right.
But then also I would listen to Ommadawn.
Yeah, I guess that was the other one that you were potentially going to suggest, right?
Yeah, which is like, that's got... The reason I didn't go for that was I think it's a better album than Platinum, but it's less related to Joe Satriani.
Yeah, makes sense.
There's a tangential relation with the Platinum Suite, but there's less of that on Ommadawn.
Right.
But if you can listen to Ommadawn, because that is more of, I would say, a typical early Mike Oldfield sound.
Yeah.
Because that's more, minimal drums on it. It's a lot of layered multi-instrumentation.
Right.
He's made up words that they sing along to, but it doesn't sound stupid like scatting.
Yep.
Okie dokie, well, that's been episode 2 of Thrown In at the Shallow End. Thank you, Dave, for being my guest and for bringing me the album.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
And, speak to you next time.
Yeah.
Ta-ra.
See ya.